I have heard many outlandish tales about Poland during my journeys across Western Europe, but none of them can do this country justice. It is, without a doubt, one of a kind. I noticed differences almost immediately after crossing border. While in France, Spain, or one of myriad German counties, my visit was almost always greeted with disdain, if not outright hostility. In Poland I was always greeted with bread and salt as an honorable guest. From tiniest of hamlets to the greatest of cities, my presence was regarded with interest, and I was often bombarded with questions and spent many a long night telling the locals tales about faraway lands. And yet, to those same people who would offer a stranger in need their last shirt, there is no enemy more hated than their neighbour. Nobles raid their foes' estates like in medieval times. Peasants fight and bicker over bits of land so small I could not place a date tree there. And those hostilities are what occupies most of their time. For there one can see yet another difference from other European powers. While in France, for instance, local peasant and lord would work for their king and their country, in Poland such centralization is unheard of. Local nobles rule their lands like warlords of old, caring little about the monarch in Warsaw, who has almost no rule over them. And for peasants, it's their local lord and bishop who have all the power over their lives. They are, these people of Piast, a nation of contradictions. On one hand, they are stout Catholics, with many a Jesuit convent dotting the landscape, and yet, in their daily lives one can see endless age-old traditions that were practiced in these lands long before armies of the cross swept old gods aside. They talk a lot about their patriotism and love of their fatherland, and yet, when war horns summon them, they look only for excuses, looking only to their own well-being and their own wealth, going to extreme lengths to never contribute anything to the country they supposedly revere. They speak volumes about ideals of knighthood, they adore the brave soldier and strong general, and yet one would see more sincere tears among them after death of a loyal family dog than that of a famed national hero. But it is their aforementioned tendency towards infighting that truly seems to drag the people of Poland down, for they have shown, as history tells us, that when they do unite themselves, which happens almost exclusively in the presence of the common enemy, they are capable of feats one would think impossible. Victory of the mighty Teutons at Grunwald, capture of Moscow in 1610, or the relief of Vienna less than 2 decades ago. The Polish are people of extreme potential, but alas, they suffer from anarchy that ruled their land. Anarchy, mind, they imposed upon themselves with good intentions. Should, however, a man capable of uniting them appear, and impose upon them iron discipline they need to break from their stagnation, I am sure that Poland could return on European stage as one of the most important figures. But should that be a good or bad thing? Only time can tell. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Crownless Eagle. In the first episode we were introduced to uncontrollable chaotic mess that is 18th century Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Since we are almost unable to conduct any external or internal politics, we were just trying to coexist peacefully with our neighbours, trying to build up our economy to keep up with other, more organised nations. Unfortunately, before the first year came to a close, Saxony, partner of our personal union, suddenly dragged us into war against almost entire Holy Roman Empire. Now, since none of our enemies actually considered us a threat at this point, we were able to quickly muster a small professional force thanks to our 3 highest-ranking military officers. By the orders of the king, this force was sent towards Saxony to support our allies in their fight against other German nations, but on the way the General Poniatowski, who's in command of this expeditionary force, decided to capture Austrian stronghold in Wrocław along the way. The defenders were determined to stop Poniatowski's advance, fighting with suicidal bravery, but in the end our superior troops and numbers won the day with minimal losses. And now that we have successfully captured Silesia, we must hurry up and continue our march to Dresden because our allies are in a very bad situation, and our enemies have surely realized that Poland-Lithuania may still be a tough enemy to face. So, let us continue. Here we are, looking at the aftermath of our assault on Wrocław, and it's time to start thinking on our next move. I'm seizing up the situation here, and we can see that Austria, Prussia and Bavaria all have forces within 1 turn's march away from Dresden. And the biggest problem is the fact that each one of these armies is larger than my own force, so trying to rush towards Dresden and trying to take them on all at once would probably not end well for me. But what worries me the most is the force in Königsberg, about an entire stack split into 2 units. This army can reach Warsaw within 1 turn as well, and I only have small garrison in my capital. So, General Lempicki, despite being a man not accustomed to war, ordered his men to take positions on the river crossing on Wisła River to act as a decoy. He commands only a small, poorly trained force, but if Prussians do actually attack him, he would be able to funnel them into bridges and fords, where his pikemen could really do some damage. But still, what we need is more armed men, but right now we're in so bad economic situation, due to war and civil unrest, that we barely make any money. We also need to protect what little remains of Saxon army, so instead of resting his men, Poniatowski will immediately go out of the fort to set up camp right next to his beaten allies. That way we can support them in case our enemies decide they want to finish the job. But then, during enemy turn, Austrians finally reorganized their troops and stormed Dresden. Now Saxons managed to beat them 3 times, but this time, after being defeated by Prussians, they no longer have the strength to hold on and are defeated completely. Prussians, on the other hand, probably mad that their earlier victory was used by someone else, regrouped their forces and marched towards Wrocław, seemingly ignoring Poniatowski's force. They probably want to take at least a bit of land in this war, but since Austrians are their allies, I think, it means that we are only available target. So during my turn, I realized that our only force just got completely surrounded. We only have a half stack worth of soldiers, slightly beat up after attacking Wrocław, and Germans have roughly over 3 stacks split into smaller forces all around us. And, let us not forget, that we have failed our mission of aiding Saxony, and that means their force, that was resting next to Poniatowski, just disbanded. With that happening, Poniatowski is being recalled back to Warsaw to explain himself to the king, but our young general has a different idea, and instead decides to do something nobody expects. It's clear that Prussians are mostly focused on taking Wrocław from me. Austrians had few chances to attack me with their superior numbers, and yet they didn't. Bavarians returned to their homes after fall of Dresden. So, since Poniatowski doesn't want to risk attacking professional Prussian force over 2 times his size, he decides instead to bypass them and strike at Berlin itself. Now the garrison itself is larger than my force, but it seems it will also be supported by Austrian force racing from Dresden. Seems that Kaiser Leopold wants to add insult to injury by saving King Friedrich right after he foiled his plans of taking Dresden. Still, whatever Austrian reasons, it means that in this battle we're going to be hugely outnumbered, and, as it seems, Poniatowski will be outclassed by Prince Eugene of Savoy, who's a commander with much more skill and experience. But it's too late to back off now, so let's see if Poniatowski can turn this one around. As it turns out, it seems that Austrian commander is even better than I expected. I've deployed my men in a line facing Prussians, but placed 1 infantry unit and all my cavalry facing south, where I expected enemy should come from. But it seems that Austrians had us completely outmaneuvered because they are approaching from the north instead, and I'm frantically ordering my cavalry to get a move on and get to the right flank immediately after the battle started. Now I was afraid that Prussians might want to hold their position, in which case I would be forced to attack them before Austrians link up with them. But, thankfully for me, defenders of Berlin decided to advance toward my positions, probably persuaded by my artillery. They're going to march slowly through the snow, and all this time my cannons are going to fire at them. It's not going to do much, because early cannons are rather inaccurate, but it will still at the very least lower enemy morale. Also, this time I've deployed out of range of enemy mortars, so I don't have to worry about that. But the biggest problem in this battle are going to be Austrians. Unlike Prussians, they actually have a varied force, with cavalry, cannons, line infantry, skirmishers, and most of all, pikemen. And it's these pikemen that worry me the most, because the only advantage I've got is my cavalry superiority, and pikes can deny that advantage wherever they go. They can also really hurt my line infantry in close combat since I don't have bayonets, and with their large numbers they can easily defeat my infantry even after running at them through musket volleys. Thankfully, Austrians decided to immediately get rid of their second important unit, their only cavalry, by charging my own horsemen. Now I've learned my lesson from the Battle of Wrocław, and this time I'm going to charge them from all directions with all my men, including Poniatowski and his bodyguards. And my men are going to absolutely demolish Austrian provincial cavalry. You can see here that after receiving Uwan's charge, Austrians fight for about 3 seconds before breaking, and as they try to run away, they are going to be cut down almost to the last man. So, it's a nice way to start this battle. We just crippled our enemy's maneuverability and enabled our own horsemen to move around freely, but we need to stay focused because we could still easily be defeated by sheer enemy numbers. The first order of business will be taking out enemy cannons. As Austrian forces march towards my positions, they leave their guns behind without any support, making them an easy target for my cavalry. Now, despite firing at their maximum range, these cannons are placed at such an angle that when they do score a hit, they will take down many of my men along the line, so I have to silence these guns fast. Now, as my cavalry charges for the cannons, Prussian force began their attack on my front line. My men have the advantage of being on the higher ground, as well as hidden behind trenches, but you can see here that we don't really have a line of sight here on our right flank, so despite our volleys we won't inflict many casualties on approaching enemy. But thankfully, it seems that Prussians are going for a line battle with my forces, and that's exactly what I had in mind for this fight, because thanks to our better position, we'll be able to hold our ground for a long time, and let our cavalry do their job. And here's our Uans, delivering a charge to Austrian cannons, taking them out with ease. So, that's another key loss for our enemies, but unfortunately we still have a long way to go. Let's see here. Ah, there's a man of the hour. Looks like he managed to get himself outmaneuvered by the Kaiser's men. See, this is exactly what I've been saying. Why the bigwigs in Warsaw decided we need him is beyond me. And who do you think they should get? Potocki is a smart fox, true, and reasonable enough to support us, given a bit of pressure, but he's way too old, and from what I hear, all this business with war is not doing him any good. Lempicki? The man is good enough for shaking down merchants, but place him in a serious situation and he becomes paralyzed. Not my point. We have our men in the military, brave and clever men. Shouldn't we use one of them? No. For one, none of our men is in charge of an entire army, and we need someone with a recognizable face, someone known to general population. That, and of course our man, has some military experience. Patrolling Podolia and getting into scraps with Turkish marauders is hardly worth mentioning, though the way he talks about it, you could think he was holding off Sultan's entire force all at once. Precisely. Poniatowski's a glory hound, and that's why he's going to accept our offer in no time. And I don't see why he should resign from his general's salary for a bribe. Bribe? No, this offer is much better. Our employers are going to make him face of the cause. All the fame, all the glory, adoration of the masses, and guaranteed place in newspapers and history books. He will buy it instantly. Assuming, of course, he survives this mess. True. Seems it's going to take a while. Pass me that bottle, would you? And now it's time for my cavalry to really start dealing damage. I've recharged one of Prussian line regiments, and as they turn around to fight my men, Poniatowski and his bodyguards are going to attack this now disorganized enemy unit. Now, I've expected Prussians to immediately run away, but they actually held off my men for quite long, and with every moment they stayed there, the Austrians were getting closer. It was taking so long that I actually had to withdraw Poniatowski from this fight and charge in once again, but with Austrians already getting into firing range, I decided it's time to get out of there and pull my cavalry back. Here's some good news though. My Uans managed to sneak around the field into town, where they found Prussian mortar team and the commander of entire garrison force with them. And they quickly took him out, so that could really shake Prussian defenders. Still though, the Austrian high-ranking commander is still on the field, and his presence just might be enough to keep Prussians in check, so we'll have to deal with him as well. Actually, all this time I had my artillery bombarding his unit, but so far my gunners failed to take him down. As this happens, my front line is about to be charged. It seems that arrival of Austrian troops actually bolstered defenders of Berlin, and most of them decide to give up line battle and instead charge at my men. The enemy is tired and forced to attack uphill, but they still have enough numbers to simply overwhelm my men, but thankfully their charge is rather unenthusiastic. So, my men are probably going to hold their line, especially since they have unexpected support. See, some enemies who stayed back during this charge are still firing, and that means that they are now firing into the backs of their own comrades, so thank you for that, armed citizenry. And we can see here that some of Prussian soldiers are already breaking, so hopefully that's going to lower the morale of their nearby friends. But a bit further away, my cavalry is having problems. It seems that our horses just panicked because this entire regiment just stopped dead in their tracks, and I had to once again order them to charge, but now they've already been shot to pieces by enemy skirmishers. The Austrians had also placed a regiment just a few steps from my line and had just gave me the volley, but unfortunately I failed to notice there because I was busy focusing on this fight here, where my Uans are trying to take down Austrian commander. And now, really bad news. Enemy skirmishers managed to break my cavalry unit, despite being unsuited to fighting horsemen. On the other hand, Poniatowski and his men finally defeated that infantry unit they were fighting for so long, but they are now being charged by Austrian pikemen, so I'm going to get them out of here as fast as I can, because this engagement would probably not go well for me. I'm actually going to use Poniatowski to kite these pikemen away from the main battle, because if they had charged my front line now, this battle would be over. Here is another dangerous move. As pikemen chase Poniatowski down, I realize that this unit of skirmishers, ones that took out my horse regiment before, is in my way, and I can't go around them because they just turn around and shoot me to pieces. So Poniatowski is going to charge straight at them and hope that they would just break before pikes arrive to help them. But then, just as I'm starting to be afraid that I might actually lose Poniatowski in this entire battle with him, some brave Uwan finally managed to strike down Austrian commander, and that is enough to break enemy skirmishes, so now we can get out of there and continue to kite pikemen away from the main line. A few minutes later, I finally realized that enemies have units firing at my lines from spitting distance, so I decide to send my men to stop that. Truth be told, at this point I was not expecting much, because most of my men in these two units on my right flank were dead, but I decided that this melee charge will at the very least stop enemy from shooting. But then, to my absolute amazed surprise, the moment my men let out their war cry, the Austrian forces just panicked, dropped their weapons and ran away. I'm not sure what happened there. Perhaps my men looked so pissed after losing so many of their comrades that when Austrians saw them they realized it's way too much to take on and just gave up. Now, as all this slaughter was happening on my right flank, I realized that there was almost no action and no casualties on the left flank. As I zoom in to take a look, we can see that the reason for this is actually the terrain. Two units that fight there are shooting each other through the forest without even seeing each other, and that means that despite dozens of volleys, almost no men actually died. It's actually an important lesson for future battles here, that units placed in the forest can survive for much longer than in the open, even against superior enemies. Hopefully I'll be able to use these tactics in the future. But now there's still one enemy unit that could turn this battle around, the pikes. I've kited them long enough that they are now actually getting into firing arc of my cannons, and I'm going to let my gunners fire at them and at the same time move some line infantry to shoot them as well. Hopefully we can break them before they get into melee range. Now, much later, between volleys from our men and rear charges from our cavalry, we managed to rout most of the enemy force, and their pikes finally decide to stop chasing Poniatowski, who has just retreated behind what remains of our line infantry, and actually commit to battle. We can see here that they're marching slowly towards our men, exhausted after trying to catch my cavalry units on foot. I'm not sure what's their idea here, perhaps they just want to buy their retreating comrades some more time to get away. They begin their slow, suicidal charge, but as my men give them close-range volley, they finally turn around and start to run. And now Poniatowski is going to pursue them because he just spent about 20 minutes running away from these men, and now it's time for some revenge. The battle is not yet over though, the enemy still have 2 companies of men in reserve, but they're just some firelock armed citizenry. Now that I have full control of the battlefield, I took some time to set my men around enemy survivors, and as they're getting shot from all sides, Poniatowski is going to lead the last charge for today and break these men almost instantly. So that was the Battle of Berlin. Despite enemy superior numbers, we have broken their lines, and now we can march into Prussian capital as victorious conquerors. And then, most probably, steal everything that isn't nailed down. Here are the battle results. We have lost about half of our men in the fight, but then again, combined German forces lost about 4,500 men, so it's an amazing victory for Poland-Lithuania and for Poniatowski himself. But despite that, we're still in a bad situation. Prussians still have about 2 stacks worth of troops ready to attack us, and there's also the fact that I probably won't be able to hold Berlin due to ridiculous unrest our occupation causes. So I decide it's time to swallow my pride and start talking peace. Since Poniatowski is already in Berlin, he decides to send an envoy to Prussian court and ask for ceasefire. I offer Prussians their capital back and even offer them Silesia to create a buffer between me and Austrians, but unfortunately King Friedrich refuses. I send Austrians the same deal and got the same answer. It seems that our enemies are aware of the fact that we just lost half of our entire forces and they still have a lot of troops to spare. So, there's literally nothing more I can do. I end the turn and prepare for the worst. Austrians once again do nothing, they just move their troops around a bit, but then, as Prussian turn begins, the force that was stationed in Königsberg marches out and attacks Warsaw. So once again we're going to have to face a larger force of superior troops led by better commander, and this time we won't even have cavalry advantage. But that's all the time I have for this episode, so we're going to see if Potocki's militia is really worth anything in the next one. Sire, there's still time for you to reconsider. We just need your signature and we could proceed. Well, Mr. Jablonowski, I have considered enough, and my answer is still no. But, sire, the strategic advantages would be negligible. But I've heard all this before. Was it Potocki who set you up to do this, to convince me while he's away? What am I talking? Of course he did. All that tirade was word by word what he told me a few months ago. Ramblings of an old man who cannot understand that time moves on, and his precious winged hussars no longer have a place on the battlefields dominated by muskets and cannons. But your highness, don't you your highness me now, Mr. Jablonowski. You and your sort always use other terms, ones I won't even try to repeat. But then always comes a situation when you want something and then suddenly you can address your king properly. Besides, it's not just my signature you need, but access to treasury as well. And let me remind you that last time I trusted your friend Potocki with money, he decided to immediately betray my trust by sending it to that traitor Poniatowski. Oh, he thinks I don't know a thing about his little scheme, and actually that is for the best, because I need him to focus on the Prussians right now. But once all that debacle is over, you can be sure there will be retribution. Sire, but since you're not going to fund standing army, and Sejm won't agree to paying war taxes or sending levies, then how are we going to defend ourselves? Well, isn't this your responsibility as the Minister of War? But don't worry, Mr. Jablonowski. There are plans in motion to get the best of this situation. But for now, let us focus on surviving our current predicament. There's much for us to discuss, so be a good man and fetch me a captain of the Royal Guard so we can begin. Thank you so much for watching the Crownless Eagle. We will see if we can hold our capital next week. See ya!